Hello, and welcome to Dumb Defenses, the podcast where we go around the world and through time to bring you the weirdest legal cases and theories. My name is Frankie.
I'm Judah.
And we apologize for not recording last week. We had some scheduling issues.
It was, first I had the flu, and then it was America's 250th birthday. And because of that, I went 4 hours deep into the woods to try and keep my dogs from having to listen to explosions.
Yeah, my dog was vibrating when we came inside, and then she slept on my head. So, this week we are going to dive into the weird and wonderful world of sovereign citizens.
Sovereign citizen. I have defended sovereign citizens. I'm sure you have defended sovereign citizens.
I have. It is interesting.
I would say proportionally I've been fired as counsel more often.
Yep. Or like a legal advisor, which is not quite being appointed, but also not really not being appointed.
My office actually refuses to take on legal
that's a
advisor.
Smart move.
Yeah, because it's just a gray zone. There's a lot of ethical concerns, so we refuse to take cases as legal advisors.
Yep. I will say though, I did a deep dive into like the history and everything, and it helped me understand a lot more where these people are coming from. So I think it will help me be a little bit more understanding when they come through. But get ready for a ride. It's a little wild.
So the format, we start off with a less deep dive and then a deep dive. So this week's your turn to nerd out. I did more of a flyover of Australia.
Mm-hmm.
Well, let's talk first about like what are sovereign citizens before we even jump in.
Well, to say what they are is kind of to dig into the deep. I went way down the rabbit hole on this one, but they are individuals who hold specific beliefs that essentially the federal government has no authority over them. They see the county sheriffs as kind of like the highest government entity that they can answer to. There's a whole lot of other conspiracy theory type things that we'll dig into that gives them certain ideas about how the court system does not have jurisdiction to hold them to account.
Well,
that's as surface as I can get.
That's as surface as you can get. It kind of like the law or certain sections of the law don't apply to them.
Yep.
I read this really, really interesting article called Whose Constitution? Sovereign Citizenship, Rights to Talk and Rhetorics of Constitutionalism in Australia by Bruce Baer Arnold and Irina Micus Fletcher. This was just generally, I think, could apply outside of Australia. But in the paper, they assert that these are individuals who expect the protection of the government without having to adhere to the laws or enforcement. This whole paper is very, very critical of sovereign citizenship and digging into the psychology. Essentially, Australia came after the wave of, we'll just call it pseudo-law, and filings in America. So America's the birthplace of this idea and this movement, but it's spread out, and Australia is being particularly hard hit right now.
Yep. And we'll dig into the history and stuff later.
Yes. There's an investigative journalist report by the Australian Broadcasting Company titled Growing Anti-Government Movement Undermining Authorities. And it's from 10 months ago, and in there, a judicial officer represents that sovereign citizenship filings in the 18 months prior to that report had grown 50% in Australia. So it's huge. And the people's beliefs about why certain laws don't apply to them are different than in America, because we have different history, different constitution, and beliefs vary, just like in America, about why specific things do not apply to them. I mean, people are going back all the way to the Treaty of Versailles.
Yep.
Because Australia was an English colony, and how English law, common law, came into Australia, and then the development of Australian states. People are going back here hundreds and hundreds of years to cite, here is where the law went wrong. So all the development, or even like the development period of the Australian Constitution, or the development of Australian states and Australian state-based authority, are not valid. And they see people declaring themselves as like royalty of Australia.
Yep. That happened in
And
Canada also.
yeah, I think we might hit Canada next week, or maybe do a twofer, on America. So, I am royalty. I am even like the Archbishop. People just declaring themselves the Archbishop of Australia. There is
People declaring themselves judges, all sorts of stuff like that.
All sorts of stuff like that. Unsurprisingly, the movement in Australia, much like America, is closely associated with racist and neo-fascist groups. So we see, just from a layman's perspective, that me being a layman, like a similar psychological profile of people in Australia. I did appreciate that there was an individual, David Simonton, in the course of corporate law offenses, so already in trouble, identified himself as the governor of the state of Sherwood, claimed that his Principality of Camside was the only legal government of Australia, and declared he now controlled Australia by default because the national government did not turn up to battle.
I love the arguments these guys come up with.
And there was another individual who called himself Prince Neil Lister, declared himself the Prince Palatine of the Kingdom of Heaven and Earth, Bishop of St. David's Diocese, and Governor of the Principality of Caledonia, Australis, not Australia, was also very unsuccessful in Australia's court. And a comment about him was, Mr. Lister is laboring under the delusion that he is the head of a non-existent state and that his conduct is beyond the reach of the laws of Australia. Mr. Lister should realize he is quite wrong in this respect.
Yep.
And there is no evidence, just like in America, like this is a widespread movement, but these people are losing all the time. I couldn't find record of anybody prevailing.
Right. They never do. Argument. But the gurus and stuff, when somebody says it didn't work, the gurus just say, well, you did it wrong. Here, pay me money, son. I'll teach you how to do it better.
I'll do it, even though they haven't been successful. There's this fun thing that I think is different in Australia than the US, is you have what the article calls pseudo-aristocratic or faux ecclesiastical, like, declarations of authority. So not just the law doesn't apply to me, but also I'm in charge. I am in charge now.
Yep.
That from the outside is hilarious, but from the inside, I'm imagining like you're in a courtroom and you have a judicial officer trying to maintain order in the court, and many records of people being held in contempt for not respecting the magistrate's authority. Many. I didn't even list any one because there were so many. Tons, many, a lot. An interesting case, even though I don't have the actual case law. I retrieved this from The Guardian. The title is Queensland sovereign citizen known as His Serene Highness loses appeal for return of gun license. Here, an individual named Kent Jenkinson had his firearms license canceled because of his open hostility towards law enforcement and declarations of belief to be in charge that the government is not valid. So they took away his gun license. That would never happen here.
No.
I would say in most jurisdictions, easier to have a semi-automatic firearm than it would be to install a rain collection system on the inside of your house.
Yes, absolutely.
So he appeals.
Because you have a right to guns. You do not have a right to collect your own rainwater.
Yeah. I still remember right when I moved to Roseburg, there was a used car dealership in town that was advertising buy a car, get a free gun. And I was like, oh, boy.
I remember that place. Oh boy.
So for a while, Mr. Jenkinson was running around with a very common thing in sovereign citizenship, a homemade license plate.
Yep.
On his truck was listed as CPO 01HSH, and the HSH referred to His Serene Highness. And when the police talked to him about his plate and asked what it meant and who it was registered with, he responded with the Human Rights and Equal Opportunity, the Pope, the Queen, the Governor General, the Office of Fair Trading, the Department of Foreign Affairs, and the Department of Territories in Canberra.
This is another thing that they do frequently is they claim to be dignitaries.
And he said that he had sent paperwork away to validate it, or have this recognized, but he hadn't heard anything back yet. I want to know where he sent the paperwork, what paperwork he sent, and what he was expecting back. You never find that out. He claimed that police were employed as private security guards for the Queensland Treasury. You will find this hatred of like Treasury rampant, like the Treasury tax offices. He had previously been associated with two more well-known sovereign citizens, Des Rowe and Des Hopkins, who founded the Anti-Corruption Academy. As I'm rolling my eyes, which is not audible. But then later, when he was being cross-examined on his appeal, he says he's not associated with them anymore, and he acknowledged the error of his ways, and in his appeal said he now has fixed an approved registration plate to his truck. But he still maintained that sovereignty is the way he chooses to live, and he believes that we are all sovereign citizens. He had never been accused of violent behavior, but the tribunal found that there was no evidence to suggest that Jenkinson was a risk to public safety, but found there was a strong public interest to deny him a gun license. The only
Based on that he was a sovereign citizen and therefore inherently
just that
untrustworthy?
That he would not follow the rule of law, that he would not follow lawful orders or direction of the rule of law. And because he had stated, like, he doesn't believe the police are legitimate, the government's not legitimate, and saying, hey, if you're going to have a weapon, if we are going to issue you a license for a firearm, that you have to acknowledge the authority on how to use that firearm. The only thing that, by all accounts, that he had been ever found or cited for was unlawful disposal of a firearm. But the tribunal finds, quote, the public would, I consider, be concerned that a man holding sovereign citizenship ideologies and who has committed an offense against the Weapons Act might be entrusted with a weapon. So they said, hey, you're spouting all of this off. We have reason to believe that you could use this unlawfully or not respect the rule of law, so you do not get to have a gun license. There were cases that were much more dramatic in Australia, but I think why I picked Kent Jenkinson's appeal to talk about is that it highlights a lot of the differences on how countries or judicial systems are managing sovereign citizenship and managing people who are saying, hey, I'm declaring very openly that I am not going to follow the rule of law and I do not respect the law enforcement in this country. And so they said, okay, well, we can't stop you from believing that, but we're going to make sure you don't have a gun.
Yeah.
So he does not have a gun. And honestly, go you, Australia. I really respect that. I mean, it's also an area who has dramatically less gun violence.
Oh, yeah.
Than the United States.
They did a gun buyback thing in the 90s or early aughts, and their gun violence after that point just plummeted.
There is so much evidence that amount of firearms in hands, I mean, in people completing suicide and people committing gun violence, amount of firearms makes a difference.
It really does. As does, mental health access and other things that we've previously discussed on the podcast.
I mean, I'm not gonna be out here preaching like, oh, Australia's perfect. I mean, it's really notable the ongoing and escalating persecution and disenfranchisement of their Aboriginal community.
Yeah.
Like I'm not saying, hey, Australia is perfect. I'm saying they're doing this better than the United
This
States
particular thing is good.
is doing it.
Yeah.
And also they have universal health care. But let's, is there anything that you wanted to dive into?
I think I'm just going to dive in and we'll see how far we get. And if it
Okay.
rolls over till next week, it rolls over till next week.
We are definitely rolling over to next week. There's the possibility of a third episode somewhere down the line because we have our own people who declare themselves royalty. I've never personally represented anybody who declared themselves to be royalty, but I know people who have.
Right.
Here we go.
I've got a whole bunch of sources. I looked at the Southern Poverty Law Center had a page on the sovereign citizen movement, as did the Anti-Defamation League. There was a sovereign citizens conversation with Dr. Christine Stachey from George Washington University. There was a sovereign citizen topic explainer by the Institute for Strategic Dialogue and Microsoft. And then I was also looking at some quantum language stuff. The Quantum Language Parse Syntax Grammar by Caleb Loy. And then the Wikipedia page on David Wynn Miller, because it had a much easier to understand explanation. So, the origins of this sovereign citizen movement, there's some indication that it may have started with the tax protest movement in the 50s, but it was founded by William Porter Gale in 1971, based on, as one might expect, racist and anti-Semitic ideals.
I mean, if there was like a bingo card of extreme movements, the free space would just be racism.
Yep. So he brought together anti-government Christian identity adherents, and Christian identity was its own kind of movement at that point, who mistrusted the state and federal governments and believed that non-white people were not human and that Jewish people were part of a satanic plot to take over the world.
You know what?
Where have I heard that before?
I'm going to put a pin in this. We should just do a whole episode on people who did horrible things because they think Jewish people are taking over the world.
Yeah, we can do that. That is absolutely a thing that we can do. So along with all of this racist stuff, they identify with posse comitatus, which is Latin for the power of the country. This is what they led them to believe, that the sheriffs are the highest government authority, based off of the Sheriffs Act of 1887, which allows sheriffs to form a posse to aid them in law enforcement. This was before there were like really formal sheriffs, like agencies and downlines and stuff like that, and there was just like a sheriff, and he needed bodies to help him do what he did, and people could just become part of the posse and get deputized that way.
I'm thinking like Wild West, like
Yes.
they're like Spurs.
Yes,
and
absolutely. That is absolutely the picture you should be getting in your head. Now there's sheriff posses, but it's like neighborhood watch type shit. People get to say, I went through the training and I'm sheriff's posse, but it doesn't actually mean anything. Whereas back then with the Sheriff's Act of 1887, it actually allowed sheriffs to deputize individuals to help them, fight crime and whatnot. So the original sovereign citizens, they serve under what they call God's law or common law, which is their interpretation of the Bible, rather than civil law or what they call statute law, which would be the American legal system. And they believe that common law is the only true law of the land.
Pause here.
Yeah.
Just when you're describing this also is mirroring the Christian right-wing political movement timeline, because we don't see people identifying like God first or God with country until the 50s when
McCarthyism.
not just McCarthyism, but because McCarthyism is all about communism. It's about communism. It's about like, hey, here's how we are different than the godless communists. So it was a way of differentiating the United States from communism. And that's really when you see American ideology affiliating itself with right-wing Christian beliefs.
Well, also, the Pledge of Allegiance didn't originally have the term under God in it. And it was in the 1950s that was added in as just another layer of like, we aren't godless communists.
Well, and that's also when we added In God We Trust to our money. People are like, oh, we've always had that. No,
Nope.
Incredibly recent.
Nope. within the century. These sovereign citizens don't believe that they're under the jurisdiction of the federal government. They reject legal documentation like social security numbers, driver's license, vehicle registrations, but they will make their own fake license plates and identification, which, for obvious reasons, will lead to run-ins in the law. The modern movement is based in the conspiracy that the American government was set up by the founding fathers under the common law, this God's law, this Bible law. And the constitutional law legal system was secretly replaced by a tyrannical commercial de facto government based in the admiralty or maritime law. This will lead to certain arguments down the road.
Are you going to...
We'll talk about the flag. We will talk about the flag.
The fringe on the flag.
Yep.
The fringe. We will
talk about the fringe on the flag. So the government was initially set up appropriately, and then at some point, this like tyrannical underground commercial de facto government took over, and this belief leads them to think that judges and lawyers are foreign agents who are aware of the takeover but argue against it. And because of this, they believe that if any of their motions are denied, it's because of treasonous loyalty to the hidden government. So all of this entire thing is so self-affirming that, you know, once you're in it, every little thing looks like it's a conspiracy theory. Every little thing looks like it is proving the point of this whole shadow government that they believe exists. There are a couple different theories of how the takeover happened. One theory, and what seems to be the most popular theory, is that in 1933, when the dollar became no longer gold-backed or silver-backed, but instead under the full faith and credit of the federal government, and because of that, no one can really pay a debt with real money anymore, real being in like big ol' air quotes, meaning that the country is now running on admiralty law, not common law. How they get from full faith and credit to admiralty law was not very well explained, but that's where they made the jump. They argue that they have been deprived of the common law and can only be held to admiralty law with their consent, which of course they do not give. And
also not true about admiralty law. You don't have to consent to be subject to
but that's their interpretation of it, right?
Sure.
So where the flag comes in is that typically on Navy ships and things like that, the flag will have this decorative fringe on it. And so if the flag in the courtroom has the decorative fringe on it, they use that as proof that this is an admiralty court, this is not a common law court, you have no jurisdiction over me.
And the fringe on the flag is literally just to fancy that.
It's decoration. It makes it pretty.
Here's a pretty flag. It also probably like keeps it from flapping around a lot.
Because a little bit more weight, yeah.
Yeah, on the edge of the flag. Our courtrooms don't have flags in them.
Yeah, come to think, I don't think ours do. Down in Douglas County, they did.
Yes.
And some of the flags did have fringe, and that was brought up frequently.
It's just that I felt like sometimes just running my head into the wall. Mm-hmm. So it is because it makes it look fancy.
Yeah. It's purely for pretty, not for anything else. But because of this whole belief that the common law government was taken over by admiralty law, they're looking for signs that that is true. And because typically Navy ships will have this fringe on the flag, probably for practical reasons of it keeps the flag still, they use that as a reason to say this is an admiralty court and I do not believe in your authority.
Just put on a yacht hat, you know, and ahoy.
So here's the big like conspiracy theory that leads to issues with people's names being in all caps. This is one that I had a really hard time wrapping my mind around, but it's a pretty central tenet to their beliefs.
Okay, so why this is important is because in case captions, which is like the header of the case,
where it says like State of Oregon versus Joe Schmo, it's
all in caps.
Yep.
And that is for purposes of uniformity of record, because, you know, like somebody with the name McAdams would be big M, little c, you know, big A. And to not screw that up, to say, okay, we're just going to put everything in all caps in the caption, and then
Right.
if you look in the body of whatever document, it's usually not in all caps.
Where this comes from is that they believe the government has pledged the American people as collateral on future earnings to foreign investors, effectively enslaving American citizens. The sale begins at the issuance of the birth certificate, something that they also don't believe in, and social security numbers. And a secret U.S. Treasury account via a corporate trust is set up in the baby's name, containing anywhere from $600,000 to $20 million in value, called a Treasury Direct account. This then splits the baby's rights between the flesh and blood baby and the corporate shell account, evidenced by the name being in all caps on Treasury bonds and other legal documents.
But that is for, just like the flag, oh, decorative, that is for uniformity.
Yep. So they refer to that name in all caps as the straw man, while the name written in mixed typeface is their true name. Some go as far as to write their name in this quantum language that we'll talk about later, which is first-middle::last, just to really show that that is their true name, that is their flesh and blood name as a sovereign citizen. They will also write sui juris, which means of one's own right, on legal documents after their name to claim all rights to which they are entitled as a free man. And they also believe that only the straw man is subject to the laws and not the flesh and blood person. So this is where they get into like essentially picking and choosing what laws they agree to be subject to.
Well, and they're also saying that, hey, you haven't charged me, this person right here, so you can't put me in jail. You've charged with
My
a
corporate
crime,
entity.
my corporate entity. So the only thing that this court has right over is the corporate entity, even though I, the flesh and blood person, got raging drunk and drove my unregistered car the wrong way up a freeway.
Right. And it gets interesting when you're arraigning these people, because part of the arraignment process is making sure that they're truly named and that their date of birth is correct. My process is I show them the charging document and say, hey, is your name and date of birth correct here? And normally people will be like, yeah, or they'll be like, oh, there's a hyphen there or whatever, like normal misspellings that happen. But they're like, well, my name's not in all caps. And I'm like, are the letters in the right order?
Yes.
And generally they're like, yeah, they're in the right order. And I'm like, okay, cool. So, Your Honor, we're in receipt of the charging document and whatever case number. Mr. So-and-so indicates that aside from their name being in all caps, they are truly named. Just to sort of like get around it so I can get done with the arraignment process, because otherwise it can take a while.
Oh my gosh. Both Frankie and I used to work for the same public defense office, and our office would handle all of the arraignments regardless of like where the case was going to be assigned out to.
Because everything came to our office and then our office manager would assign out all the cases.
Yeah, would assign the cases. So even if the case wasn't going to be in the office, so you would arraign an individual and they were most likely never going to be your client. Like that's the only time that you're going to touch paperwork that's associated with them. They could be in a completely different office. They could later hire a private attorney. Like we didn't know. And it would be on a rotation. So one of the, I think 14 attorneys in the office, we would get assigned a week and we would do all of the arraignments for that week.
Yep.
And if you had a sovereign citizen come in that was arguing about it, I mean, there were times that, I mean, I didn't handle the case where the individual like refused to leave the jail cell to go to the courtroom because they didn't recognize the authority of the court, and then kept talking over the judge. And so the judge wound up just like reading stuff out loud and making the jail keep that person muted just so they could get through the arraignment.
Yeah. Yeah. So if you are familiar with why they make these claims and you can sort of sidestep it, it makes it a lot easier. And then they start going off and I'm just like, I'm not going to be your assigned attorney, but you can talk to them about this. And they're like, okay. Sometimes you get in a situation, I saw this happen once, where the sovereign citizen wanted to represent themselves, and judge was like, okay, so we'll go over a waiver of your right to counsel. And he's like, well, I don't want to waive any of my rights. And judge was like, okay, well, let me appoint you an attorney. And he's like, well, I don't want an attorney appointed. We go back and forth about 5 or 6 times on this, and the judge was finally like, how about a legal advisor? Which, the reason that Judah's making that noise is that when you are appointed as a legal advisor, the individual is representing themselves. However, you are there for them to ask questions of if needed. So your name is on the case, but you have little to no control over what happens in the case, which puts you in a little bit of an ethical conundrum.
And you're also giving advice. You're giving legal advice, hence the term advisor, but not acting as that person's counsel. That's the reason why my office, as a rule, will not be appointed as legal advisors. We will not take the appointment, because to me that sets you up for a set of ethical concerns.
Right, because you're not formally appointed as their attorney, but they could turn around and say, well, you gave me bad advice.
And
there's
you're still the legal advisor, and that something else sovereign citizens regularly do, like it is their stock and trade. 2 words: frivolous motions.
Yes, and we will get to that. They call it paper terrorism. And that's literally what they call it. So getting back to this trust account, because they believe that this exists, this 600,000 to 20 million, depending on who you ask, Treasury Direct account that the government has bought you with, because they believe that this exists, they will frequently write something like accepted for value on bills from the IRS, believing that the money in the trust will just get transferred to the IRS. Because whatever taxes they owe, the government already has this money under their name, which is not true. It does not exist, but that's what they believe.
So have you ever read any Terry Pratchett books?
I've not.
He's an excellent satirist.
I've been told I should read some.
Very funny, but in his books, there is something called the Pork Futures Warehouse, because you can buy and sell pork futures, pork that has not yet been born. So in that world, the pork must exist somewhere.
Yeah.
So it's the warehouse that stores the future pork.
It very much is that vibe. Yes. Absolutely. So to go through this process of separating yourself from your corporate shell, they file documentation with the Secretary of State's office, declaring themselves sovereign.
I declare bankruptcy.
They sign it in either blood or red ink or with fingerprints, and then they publish it in the newspaper. This process called redemption is how they declare themselves to be a sovereign citizen separate from their corporate shell. And once they have this redemption, they are no longer under the authority of the federal government, which frees them from taxes, motor vehicle laws, zoning restrictions, etc. They may evidence that they have done this publicly by putting it on special custom-made license plates that they then put on their cars and then get pulled over.
And then get cited.
Yeah, well, there's a couple specific instances I'll talk about in a bit where they got themselves in trouble for that. Once they've separated themselves from their corporate shell, they file a UCC-1 statement against the corporate shell to preserve the Treasury Direct account's value for their own use.
And UCC stands for Uniform Commercial Code.
Yes.
That is not an actual law. So any of the uniform criminal code, uniform commercial code, it was a set of drafted sample laws for states to hypothetically base their codes off of.
Right.
Because 50 states, a lot of room for, things switching around. So for a level of uniformity between the states, these were published as an example, drafted by a legal team years ago to say, here's a sample draft of laws that you can work off of to make your own laws. They are not actually laws.
Right. And you'll see various states will have had like their common law, for example, criminal laws for years. And then at some point in time after the Uniform Criminal Code was drafted, they then zhuzh their, for example, burglary 1 statute to more closely align with that uniform federal example, while still kind of maintaining the case history and things that had come up through that state. But yeah, in general, the Universal Commercial Code doesn't apply to anything except commercial transactions, which is more than what they use it for.
We very rarely hear about the Uniform Commercial Code. UCC, when we say that, it stands for Uniform Commercial Code, not Uniform Criminal Code, even though they're both UCC. But the federal government has used interstate commerce as an excuse or like as a basis for a lot of rulings to impact state laws.
Right. Right.
So,
and they, for example, it used to be that there were some states where the drinking age was 18, but then the feds said, hey, if you want Department of Transportation kickbacks, you need to raise it to 21.
21. For example, Washington State, up until my dad, was a younger man, the drinking age was 18. Then they're like, hey, you got to change it. Otherwise, you don't get this transportation money because they control funding for interstate highways and interstate freeways.
And it can cost the shipping companies money if this doesn't happen because, for example, like you could just go straight through Kansas. I'm picking a breadbasket state out of the air, but Kansas didn't sign on. So now the shipping company has to go up and around Kansas when it would be cheaper for everybody to just go straight through
Kansas.
Kansas then loses the revenue from truck stops and stuff like that, along with the DOT kickbacks. And so that is sort of the way to strong arm states into doing what the feds want.
And that's why all states, even Alaska, which connects to 0 states, and Hawaii, drinking age is 21.
Yep. So they use this money, or they try to use this money from the Treasury Direct account to pay IRS bills and things like that. They're making their own license plates. When they're filing this UCC-1 statement, they will frequently have to forum shop. We talked about this in, I think, our very first episode. Forum shopping is when you file something not necessarily in the appropriate venue in your home venue because you think you'll get a better result elsewhere. These guys have to start forum shopping because many jurisdictions have caught on to the whole sovereign citizen thing and reject their filings. So they have to find some place that hasn't done that yet.
That will just accept it.
Will just accept it. I'm
interrupting you again. So you said forum shopping.
Yes.
Let's talk a little bit about form shopping.
Oh.
So a lot of the individuals that we're talking about, they are not educated on the law, like what it actually is.
Right.
And then they've gotten this idea that I can be a free citizen. There's that ideal of freedom. But when they're doing these filings, a lot of the filings that you see are really similar to each other because they're spending hundreds of dollars.
There are these gurus that set up these social media groups and things like that to sell these pleadings. And I'll dig into that a little bit later. And they're all in this very specific grammar form, which is really hard to read. We'll dig into that.
So people are losing, but I just want to say, these people, not only are they losing their cases,
it's a total scam,
but they're spending hundreds or thousands of dollars to get invalid paperwork.
Yep.
Where they are not going to prevail, period.
Right.
Period in court.
Yep.
And they spent hundreds or thousands of dollars to get gibberish.
Yeah, absolutely. They have a whole bunch of these pseudo-legal documents that Judah was alluding to. Some of them are called bills of exchange or bonded promissory notes, and these are documents that they use to tap into these Treasury Direct accounts. They could look like cashier's checks, but they're literally worth not even the paper that they're printed on. But that doesn't stop them from using them to pay for any number of luxury items like boats and cars and things like that. They also believe that the 1099 OID, which is the 1099 that is used for treasury bonds when you're filing your taxes, allows them to access that Treasury Direct account. So everything comes back to this huge pot of money that doesn't actually exist, and them essentially using fraudulent documents to try and access it, which gets them in trouble. Aside from this Treasury Direct account, which doesn't exist but they believe exists, they believe that any other government documents like Social Security cards, driver's licenses, are actually contracts designed to drag people back into the commercial government and re-enslave them. So if a sovereign citizen were to get like a standard Oregon driver's license, they would be surrendering themselves back to the de facto government. And that's where they rely so much on the UCC, because they think that this is all just contract law. Because these documents, like your birth certificate, which babies can't contract, your social security card, which babies can't contract, your driver's license, are all contracts that are you saying, yes, please re-enslave me, and then I lose this thousands or millions of dollars that are in my Treasury Direct account.
I just, trying to see with eyes of empathy, because I've had and witnessed really frustrating experiences in court where people are just losing and they're getting beaten down.
Yeah.
But to recognize and say, like, I appreciate the notion of freedom and what you want it to represent. And then going back to, I think it's Aristotle about the contract of government, by living in a society that you are implicitly
Yep.
agreeing to abide by the rules and laws of that society. And if you don't want to abide by those rules, you cannot engage or live in the protections of the society. So by gathering the benefits of society, you must therefore abide by the rules.
Right. And these guys really are trying to have their cake and eat it too, which is not something that you can legally do, but it's something that they have tried to figure out a way to do so that they can be free, but also have this giant pot of money that the government apparently has stashed away, which no, they don't. Generally, there's no real centralized leadership, but there are a bunch of national group figureheads or gurus and local leaders. These leaders engage in such things as tax evasion, squatting, ignoring laws relating to driver's license and vehicle registration, because, again, they believe that free men and women are not bound by such laws. They claim that they are traveling, not driving, because they are not transporting commercial goods or paying passengers. Again, back to the UCC of interstate commerce. They essentially pick and choose which laws to follow.
I mean, like, you can pick and choose. You can, in this state and in this country, you can drive a car without a driver's license. But
there are consequences.
No. You can do it with no consequences if you are on completely private property where the road does not connect to public roads. Premises only for the private. So,
correct.
Like the Mythbusters episode when they're testing the drinking and driving, I think that's a famous one. They're on a private racetrack.
Yep.
Because you are allowed to drive a vehicle intoxicated, not on any premises open to the public.
Right. And other things would be like gated communities where they actually have like the person checking that you actually live there before they let you in. That would not be considered open to the public.
Yeah. But just like if a Amazon driver can pull into your driveway at any time, your driveway is open to the public.
Right. While we're talking about the Commerce Clause and them talking about traveling rather than driving and therefore not needing a driver's license, I wanted to bring us back to what the Constitution actually says. The Commerce Clause, in pertinent part, reads that Congress shall have the power to regulate commerce with foreign nations and among the several states and with the Indian tribes. And so essentially they are bastardizing this by saying, because we are not engaged in this interstate commerce, we cannot be regulated by Congress.
Even though they're being regulated by state government.
Aside from when we're looking at how they look at text and their name being in all caps, sovereign citizens are also wary of a single capitalized word where it's like big letter, little letters, like citizen. This goes back to the 18th century colonies, where before English was standardized and nouns were capitalized, but by the Revolutionary War, that was less so the practice. And because of this, in the sovereign citizen lexicon, if the word citizen is capitalized, big C, little citizen, that is a 14th Amendment citizen who would be subject to the state and federal governments, versus a small c citizen would be a sovereign citizen.
Oh my God, I hadn't heard that one.
Yes.
That's a new one for me.
So, the reason why the 14th Amendment citizen is a thing. It's
not really a thing, by the way. Like, why people think it's a thing.
Why people think it's a thing. So, there's been a lot of talk about the 14th Amendment in the news recently because Section 1 of the U.S. Constitution which was ratified in 1868, says all persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens of the United States and of the states wherein they reside. No state shall make or enforce any law which shall abridge the privileges or immunities of citizens of the United States, nor shall any state deprive any person of life, liberty, or property without due process of law, nor deny any person within its jurisdiction of the equal protection of laws. Right? Lots of talk about birthright citizenship. It barely got upheld by the Supreme Court last week. That should be bigger news than it is. But anyways, it also freed all the slaves, right? That was the impetus behind that clause, was to give the freed slaves citizenship to the United States. Sovereign citizens believe that this makes a second class of federal citizen, being people who were made citizens under the 14th Amendment, capital C citizen, rather than original state citizens, little c, which the feds try to lure people into with such things as social security numbers, driver's licenses, and zip codes.
Ooh, zip codes. I'm also thinking like this is probably getting into some racism because the African American population of the United States and Asian American population, the indigenous peoples of this country, were not citizens.
Correct.
Under their definition.
Yep, exactly. So capital C citizens are people who are subject to federal laws. Small c citizens are sovereign citizens. While most sovereign citizens are not part of established groups, like we talked about, there's not really any big figureheads aside from the gurus who rotate. They do work to create...
They're getting arrested. Sorry, go ahead.
Right. They do work to create fictitious entity groups that purport to have legitimate authority, such as government agencies, law enforcement, consulates, and embassies, Native American tribes, indigenous groups, juries and courts, countries, and colonies. Some have claimed they have assemblies, which would be similar to legislative assemblies, as a fourth branch of government, i.e. we the people is a fourth branch of government which acts as a check on the feds. Which, in theory, voting people out of office is how the people check the feds, right? But for those listening, because we don't do video shows yet, Judah's face is completely covered with his hands in pain. Yeah. They've also had fictitious law enforcement groups since about the 1990s. Their officers have ID cards, badges, raid jackets, decals, and markings on their vehicles. And they've used these to get out of traffic stops, get past court security, and, of course, intimidate people. Some have declared themselves constitutional marshals, and any sovereign citizen can create a fictitious police group. Because, of course, they can. Because they are their own citizens.
There are things that you can declare yourself right now with no consequences. I have, for example, declared myself for some time now to be a cryptozoologist. There are no accreditations available because it's fake.
In case people don't know what that means, do you want to define it?
Cryptozoologist is the study of mythical creatures. So I myself have happily declared myself a cryptozoologist. And as the John Oliver show pointed out a while ago, you can also declare yourself a financial advisor right now. And for a while, he had a financial advisor certificate generation program. You cannot legally declare yourself a law enforcement officer.
Oh.
That is against the law, and there are crimes associated with it. Specifically,
it's a felony.
Specifically, impersonating a public safety officer.
It's a felony. Yeah, so they create these little fictitious worlds about them. Some of them have these, like, their own little tribunal courts, which can issue warrants and things like that. In Douglas County at one point, apparently one particular sovereign citizen who tried to hold Judge Poole in contempt and issued a warrant for Belinda. And I was in their courtroom later and Belinda was like, "I'm under arrest." And I'm like, what?
Judge Poole, that's a deep cut. He hasn't been on the bench for a while.
Oh yeah, it was early in my practice that happened. But yeah, they try to take control of courtrooms saying that they're the judge instead, and it doesn't tend to go well.
I never practiced in front of Judge Poole, but I don't imagine that went over that great with him.
No, I wouldn't imagine so either. Belinda found it hilarious, but
I'm sure she did.
But Judge Poole not so much. So we have largely been talking about traditional sovereign citizens, the racist brand. There are also Moorish sovereign citizens.
Let's put a pin in it. We've gone an hour. We've got a lot of. Let's move on to Moorish sovereign citizens, of which I have tangential experience.
Okay.
And there's also a cult associated with that.
Yes, there is.
That big Fed raid. Surprise.
Right. So Moorish sovereign citizens blend the traditional sovereign citizens' beliefs with the concepts and terminology of the Moorish science temple.
All right.
This began...
No. We've got an hour. We got to do this next week because I know you have a lot of material on Moorish sovereign citizens.
Well, on Moorish sovereign citizens, I don't have as much actually. This is actually going to be relatively short, and we can start next week with paper terrorism.
No. Let's because I've got a solid 15 minutes on the cult that was associated with Moorish sovereign citizens.
Okay.
And the federal rate and like how that was developed, and then we can talk about its early affiliation with the Nation of Islam. Then the Nation of Islam was like pass, like
hard pass
from the Nation of Islam on that. So I vote that we end this week by each of us talking about our personal favorite conspiracy theories.
Oh my. Okay. Do you want to go first or should I?
Feel free.
Jewish space lasers.
Ooh, Jewish space. I love this one.
And I feel entitled to talk about this because I'm Jewish. And I went to Brandeis. So, Jewish space lasers. This came out of a comment made by Marjorie Taylor Greene when she was early in her time in Congress, which she has since stepped back because she broke up with Trump. But that was not actually what she said. She said, and I don't remember exactly what the quote is, but she said something along the lines of like relating like something about crop circles and the Rothschild family, which very clearly was a dig at Jews because they're a very prominent and unfortunately conspiracy theory laden Jewish family. But what made me giggle when I first heard it referred to as Jewish space lasers is that Brandeis University has a NASA lab underneath its main academic quad. For people who have not been there, when you're walking from the main campus up to the main humanities quad at Brandeis University in Waltham, Massachusetts, there are 52 steps up and 3 steps down. So you go up a mountain, across, and there's like one of the buildings on top of that, and then down 3 to get to the rest of the quad. The reason for the 52 steps up and 3 steps down is because there's a NASA wind tunnel underneath the steps of the RAB quad.
Can you hear it?
No, not at all. But at the science kids have access to it and stuff like that for research and whatnot. Brandeis, being a little tiny liberal arts college, they have that. They have one of the country's premier biomechanics labs. There's a lot of really cool stuff on campus. But when this whole Jewish space lasers thing blew up, because I knew that it was just somebody just trying to pin everything on the Jews again, because that's what happens. I'm sitting here going like, I wonder if they know about the wind tunnel.
Underneath Brandeis?
Underneath Brandeis. Because Brandeis wasn't founded as a Jewish institution. It was founded as an institution that did not have quotas. And because most schools at the time that it was established in 1948 only allowed in like 3% of their population to be Jews, all the Jews flocked to Brandeis because they knew that they wouldn't be kept out just because they were Jewish. And so it did become a predominantly Jewish institution. It was named after Louis Brandeis, who was a Supreme Court justice. My class of 2007 coming in was the first class ever in the 50 some odd years it had been established at the time to be less than 50% Jewish. Just tying it all in, I was like, oh, this would be even funnier if they knew about the NASA lab underneath Brandeis.
We should get you like a Jewish space lasers, like laser pointer. You could play with your cat.
No, there have been like pins and stuff that I've been like, I should probably buy that.
Okay, I do love Jewish space lasers. I had completely forgotten about Jewish space lasers. Excellent. My favorite conspiracy theory ever since I read it. And I consider myself a conspiracy theorist. So I like to study
like metaphysics of conspiracy theories.
Yeah, I love a conspiracy theory. My favorite one that I've ever heard is Finland is not real. Yep. There's a conspiracy theory that the country of Finland is not real. It doesn't exist. And it was created so that rich Japanese people could whale in the waters where Finland isn't without restriction. And that if you think you're in Finland, you're actually in a neighboring country. You're not really in Finland.
My exchange student that I had a couple years back would probably disagree with that. She's Finnish.
Our mutual friend, Marguerite, also Finnish.
Yeah.
A lot of family in Finland, been to Finland. I did share that conspiracy theory with her. She got much amusement out of it. This is, it's kind of akin to the belief that the gods lived on top of Mount Olympus, a very climbable mountain.
Yeah.
But like Finland, a place you can go to.
Yep.
To prove that Finland is real.
There's in fact an airport in Helsinki.
You can look on a map, you can look on your GPS, you can prove to yourself that you are in Finland at the time, but to them, no, Finland is not real. And for that reason, it doesn't seem to be hurting. I don't think the Finnish people are particularly offended that a few people out there think that Finland isn't real. They're like, yeah, we're a vibrant culture.
Very vibrant culture, yeah.
Very vibrant culture, very vibrant indigenous culture, a lot of beautiful art and music. They're like, no, we don't care that you think that we're not real. We're still here, and we're still Finland. And
I mean, there's a whole lot of people who think various people aren't real, like people who don't think trans people exist. And yet you and I are sitting here talking.
Here we are. But they point to the name Finland to be like, hey, that's an inside joke, that it's just there for the whale fin.
Oh, geez.
Even though it's the land of Finns.
Yeah.
Like the Finnish
people. The Finnish people.
So that's my favorite one. Finland is not real. It seems pretty innocuous and also freaking hilarious. And if anybody from Finland would like to sponsor a trip for me to come prove that Finland is real, I'd love to take a tour of Finland. Seems great.
It does. It seems like a really, really fun place to visit.
Yeah, invite me to Finland. I want to eat your cheese.
Right. So next week, we will be diving into the Moorish sovereign citizen community, paper terrorism, and more. I've got another 4-ish pages of notes, so we didn't even get through half my notes.
What am I getting? So I just did Australia. Canada's
you want to dive into Canada and the Queen there?
We could do Canada if I have time. Let's talk about the rabble rousing they're causing in South Africa.
Yep. Yeah. We've got a whole diaspora, and it all started right here in the good old US of A.
Who says that America has no culture?
We've got our plan for next week. Like, subscribe, leave a rating, leave a review. We don't have socials yet, but if you want to leave us a question, comment, or concern, please email us at dumbdefensespodcast@gmail.com. And we will see you next week.
Wait.
Besides,
we're seeing next week. Email us your favorite conspiracy theory.
Yes.
You cannot have invented it.
It
must be somebody else.
We will open the show. If we get people emailing us their favorite conspiracy theories, we will open the show with those before diving back into the conspiracy theories that are sovereign citizens.
And then one week we're going to talk about just all the harm that the conspiracy theory, which Frankie you're familiar with, the protocols of the elders of Zion has caused to the Jewish community.